Hi, welcome to Bot Brack. Recently I've been doing my top 10 films of various film directors. A while ago I sort of did three things called Masters of Cinema. There was David Fincher, Brian De Palma and Michael Mann. But I kind of gave up on that because it was ended up going through all the films and it was far too long, the pieces. But then it occurred to me it was a shame because I like to have done top 10 films by them, but it didn't seem any point going back to do that. And I do have their top 10 films in the notes on the feature. So if you were interested, you could check those out. Like these top 10 films maker things don't get many views at all, although John Cartman is doing quite well. What I wanted to do was kind of look at a couple of filmmakers that I couldn't do top 10 films of because one of them hasn't got 10 films and another one, it'd be stretching it to sort of do a top 10 because there'd be no point because, the films would be putting at 9, 10 and 8 and so on. Wouldn't be that good. But also, I've done kind of 20. By the time I've completed the top 10 films of various filmmakers, there'll be 23 filmmakers. And I thought, well, 25 is a good number, isn't it? So I'm doing this one down Sergio Leone, a little massive cinema. So we'll try and keep it brief. He's a director to film fans that doesn't really need a lot of or any introduction. He's truly one of the most original and greatest and influential filmmakers ever. What's interesting, he kind of started off with a kind of hackish film called The Colossus of Rhodes, which is a sword and sandals Greek mythology epic, Italian made, with an American actor called Rory Calhoun. So Rory Calhoun's quite interesting because he was, I think Rory Calhoun was kind of blackmailed almost by, was it called Confidential magazine? There's basically a magazine in the 50s, kind of scandal magazine in Hollywood, and they kind of traded stories, and Rory Calhoun was a closet homosexual, and obviously they didn't want that getting out. And I think he might have been thrown under the bus to kind of keep Rock Hudson's secrecy safe, as it were. And I could be wrong on this. I might have seen this in like Hollywood Babylon or something like that. That's quite a little interesting side thing. I've got to confess, I haven't seen The Colossus of Rhodes. I haven't dug it out, but it was a financial success. It made a $350,000 profit, it says. So that gave him money, and then he wanted to make a Western, and that Western was 1964. That's quite a bit of time after The Colossus of Rhodes, and that was a fistful of dollars. And that really starts his association with Clint Eastwood. It's the film that makes Clint Eastwood a star in Europe, and eventually he will become a star in America on the back of it. We'll come to that. But this was a huge success. He basically does a remake of Yojimbo, the Akira Kurosawa film. Obviously, Kurosawa, very influential director on action filmmakers, westerns and so on. Obviously, they remade the Magnificent Seven. Sorry, the Magnificent Seven's a remake of the Seven Samurai. So that would have been sort of Leone's touchstone. And this would have been a fairly low budget film. I'll just have a look here. Budget $200,000 to $225,000. So, I'm not sure what that would be adjusted for inflation now. Probably quite a bit, but not that much. Obviously, Eastwood wasn't a known quantity. He'd been in Rawhide. Just straightening this up a bit, sorry. And Leone just wanted a Western actor, an actor from Westerns who was known to audiences in some fashion. A lot of these Italian Westerns often cast kind of American actors you haven't heard of. Or like I think of Bud Spencer and Terence Young, in those other spaghetti westerns. I don't know their work apart from that, and they became kind of stars in Italy. I think they appeared in My Name Is Nobody, a film that Leone produced. Maybe one of them did, or maybe both. I'm not sure. I haven't checked that. But anyway, Fistful of Dollars is a great film. I remember seeing this as a kid, and I was pretty much sold on a bit when Clint goes, you see my donkey doesn't like being laughed at. He takes out the guys. And like I'd seen Eastwood, I think, in Where Eagles Dare first. That was my first experience of Clint, as it were. And he's still my favourite movie star of all time. And then, I saw The Man with No Name and like Dirty Harry, and it's been like that ever since. What's interesting about this film is how perfectly formed it is, really. It's 99 minutes long, just checking there. It's got none of the flab, although I love the flab of his epics, of his more epics films, but it's a lean piece. You've got the great Gian Maria Volonté in it, those eyes, crazy. Really good, loads of good sequences, but it's really Eastwood. It's amazing what Leone did, really, having the poncho, using the kind of Hispanic influence on his dress sense, and creating a different kind of iconography for the Gary Cooper style cowboy. I mean, Clint's lean, fairly lean, long leg, tall. So he fits that, identity. I mean, if you remember, like John Wayne's always more thick set. So Eastwood is very much Gary Cooper to me. But it's obviously also that classic thing where he doesn't have a lot of dialogue. It's about his look. It's about him, how he holds himself in the frame. And Leone kind of recognises the power of that. Possibly influenced again by how Steve McQueen was shot in the Magnificent Seven. Keeping dialogue pared down for an actor like McQueen, and obviously The Great Escape. And in that respect, Eastwood's a kind of reactor. And that's just my take on it. So he follows it up with A Few Dollars More. Interestingly enough, he wants a guy in this who's appeared in John Ford westerns, and he picks Lee Van Cleef. Lee Van Cleef, I think, is in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and other things. So that's just quite a big thing for Leone, and obviously Lee Van Cleef at this point had been working in films in supporting parts. So he was kind of a bigger cheese in a western sense than Eastwood was, although that seems extraordinary today, and it kind of gets equal billing. Eastwood's at the top of the thing, but Lee Van Cleef is pretty foregrounded in it, as is Gian Maria Volonté. So this kind of takes things up a notch. It's a lot longer. It's more epic in scope. It's 132 minutes. Obviously, the plot is more complicated, but I think what works with this is the flashbacks. This is where Leone, in A Fistful of Dollars, it's all kind of real time forward motion, but in this it has flashbacks, and this is something that he'll use throughout his career after this in his elliptical edits in that respect. It's got some amazing shots. There's amazing shots in Fistful of Dollars, obviously, but this takes it more. Brings those types of shots to the foreground more, particularly the way he shoots from low angles, particularly the shots where the foreground and the background are all in the same kind of focal point of reference. And he just does amazing close-up of the watch in the frame, and then you can see the gun and the other gunfire in the distance, which would probably be Lee Van Cleef. These kind of shots had never been seen in cinema before, and they're purely cinematic shots. I mean, the closest thing you would get would be Wells' his kind of deep focus shots, Citizen Kane and such, but it's something about the framing, the way he uses, I think these films are shot in the Italian form of kind of 70mm. Again, don't quote us on that, certainly Good, the Bad and the Ugly is. So he uses the whole width of the frame in a way that other directors hadn't up to that point. I don't think anyone realised at the time. I think people watching it, the critics would be dismissive of this, but these became hugely popular in Italy. But, people, obviously I don't make films, but people of my generation would have devoured these films on TV and so on in the 70s, and then your future filmmakers like Tarantino, etc., would become massively inspired. The other thing is, we have to mention the scores by Ennio Morricone, and these are what put Morricone on the map internationally. Up to this point, he'd already done a lot of scores in TV, film. He's done over 400 scores until the time of his death, Ennio Morricone. But the kind of music gets better. Fistful of Dollars has got that great theme. Sometimes I get this and that theme and A Few Dollars More slightly muddled up, I must confess, because they're both kind of similar to whistling. But this has the ticking clock theme, as I would call it. And it's amazing. It's an amazing piece of music, and it's that thing where Leone sort of realised how he could cut the music to the images, and I'm not sure how far down the line Morricone was with these scores, but later on he would often have music or compose the music before the film was shot. On the film coming up we'll talk about, the music would be pumped onto the set, and then things choreographed to that. Which again, it just takes everything up, this synthesis of sound and image. In that respect, he's kind of building on Hitchcock. Obviously, film composers always been very important, but I think Hitchcock took it up a notch with his association with Bernard Herrmann. The two are intertwined, and the Hitchcock films that are scored by Bernard Herrmann are infinitely his best, some of his best work, and obviously Leone and Morricone is one of the great partnerships, like Williams and Spielberg and so on. So yeah, it's a great film. It's got a great climax, a little more emotional depth, and it shows like another side to Eastwood character. It brings a bit more depth to him. Kind of, he's got a kind of good moral centre in a lot of respects. And Lee Van Cleef plays the good guy in this. Obviously, the next film they would do together, this is Eastwood, Van Cleef, is one of the greatest for films ever made. Western or no Western, of course, that's The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. And this is truly epic. Leone had obviously had success with the first two films. The budgets had gone up, and with this he got a $1.2 million budget. This enabled him to make a film. It's nearly 3 hours long. It's proper cut, but also it enabled him to stage those huge Civil War scenes, which are some of the most epic. Just going back, I'm just checking the budget for a few dollars more, and it was $600,000. So his budget's kind of doubled each time almost. What's interesting with this is he wanted a proper American star, well-known character actor, so taking it up a notch from Lee Van Cleef, and then he got Eli Wallach. So again, that was a big thing. Wallach gets second billing on the film poster. He's actually in the centre. So again, Wallach's better known in America than Eastwood is. Remember, Eastwood's the guy from Rawhide. Eli Wallach had been in the lineup with the Don Siegel film. Don't quote us on whatever parts, but he was a really well-known New York character actor who did get some good billings. Great actor. Wallach's brilliant in this film. I think people forget how good his performance is as Tuco, and there's a lot of depth, particularly his relationship with his brother, and those scenes are handled brilliantly. And with this film, the acting gets better. There's a real emotional depth to the Civil War scenes. There's a lot of pathos. Morricone's themes are amazing. There's a great bit when they blow up the bridge, and the general, the guy in charge, gets to see it blown up, and he's mortally wounded. Eastwood's amazing in this. He's so cool. Van Cleef is just properly evil. And it's the violent, and he puts. That was probably the first time I saw someone put a pillow over someone's head in a film and shoot him in the head. That was probably the first time it's done in film. That's been copied like it happens in The Driver, the Walter Hill film. I suspect Walter Hill's probably influenced quite a lot by Leone. If you look at a film like The Driver, the way the Ryan O'Neill character says very little, you could almost, drop that kind of character into one of these films. It's incredibly shot film. The climax is maybe the greatest climax ever in film history. Is it one of them? But what are your great climaxes in film? You've got to have the climax, The Good, Bad and the Ugly, the editing, the bits where Eli Wallach's character Tuco's running around the graveyard and the camera's just spinning, and it uses, I think, a telephoto lens, so he's in focus and the background's just spinning, and it's really psychedelic. And then the triangular composition in the widescreen when they do have the shootout at the end. Amazing, and that influence on John Woo. One of the things I didn't realise, I didn't see this in full frame until I went to the cinema to see it sometime in the 90s, I'd seen it on TV. It's only when you see those full frame compositions that you kind of realise the majesty of Leone's eye, and then the way it's cut with Morricone's music, which is one of the best scores ever written. It's just, it says here that people call it definitive spaghetti western, and it is. And these were changing the western at the time, along with Peckinpah. You could go on all day about that one. Mexican standoff, of course. There's a picture here of the graveyard. You can actually visit that now. People have uncovered it. If you watch a documentary called Sad Hill, I think it is, and it's great. And guys excavate the site and they've put it back together. So after this, he wants to get a true American star. Now remember, these films haven't been released, the spaghetti westerns, yet. They won't get released till 1967, the same year. There will be a hit, and then Eastwood will come an American star. He will start in Where Eagles Dare, Hang 'em High, Coogan's Bluff, Paint Your Wagon. These films will all do pretty well. He's a star. He won't become a superstar till Dirty Harry, and that really he needs to kind of get away from the cowboy image. If you see Two Mules for Sister Sarah, that's got a spaghetti western vibe in a lot of ways. Says the gross of The Good, Bad, and Ugly here, $39 million. So back in the late 60s, you'd be looking multiplier about 7. So if we released it now, it'd be grossing kind of $250-300 million. Okay, so his next film is maybe the greatest western ever made. People would talk about Searchers, Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, those John Ford westerns. But, Once Upon a Time in the West is kind of a distillation of all the great things that happened in the western in a lot of ways before that. Screenplay, story by Dario Argento and Bernardo Bertolucci, so 2 up-and-coming guys who will make their own path, as it were. Just looking here, the budget $5 million, so like big budget. He's quadrupled the budget of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Box office in the United States 5.3 million, tickets worldwide 40 million, so actually grossing more than The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So Claudia Cardinale is actually the top billed star here, probably for the Italian and European market. She was very big. She'd been in the Pink Panther, and of course Visconti's a leopard. But the main thing here is the casting of Henry Fonda. So he finally gets a genuine actor who been the lead in John Ford films. I think he's the lead in Fort Apache. Certainly the My Darling Clementine, the great western, the John Ford one. So Fonda's amazing in this. The opening, his first opening scene is just totally shocking, and he came in with brown contact lenses in, because it make him look more evil. And like Leone was, well, what are you wearing those for? He goes, well, I thought it made me look evil. He goes, no, I want Henry Fonda's blue eyes. And Fonda's brilliant. I mean, he's chilling in this. And then Bronson's amazing. It's quite interesting. Bronson kind of takes the Eastwood role in this, Charles Bronson. And his face, the close-ups, you get this little lovely pudgy face. It's so textured, you can look at it. And again, Leone uses that really well in a way that he did more so than Eastwood. He uses Eastwood eyes, but he uses the whole texture of Bronson's face for the close-ups. The opening scene's incredible. If he created one of the greatest climaxes in film history, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the opening scene of this film is quite probably maybe the best opening scene. Amazing use of sound, score, space in the frame, and then he has Woody Strode in the opening scene, another John Ford regular. This is brilliant. Jason Robards is great. Again, it uses the flashback structure from For a Few Dollars More, and it's great when you see what Henry Fonda's done to Bronson's brother and the significance of the harmonica. It's fucking amazing. Is this film better than The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? This is what I always feel with this film. I always feel The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is the film you'll watch for entertainment, and that'll be one of your favourite films. This is probably the better film. This is Leone's masterpiece. The first time I saw it, I was just like, Jesus Christ. And there's an amazing shot, one of my favourite shots of all time, when the train pulls into the station and the camera follows Claudia Cardinale into the town, and the camera cranes up and the music swells. Morricone's amazing score. And he actually pumped the music on the set and timed the camera move to that, and that's why it's so special. Love the other thing with Morricone on this, he's going bow, wow, wow. He uses a flat 5, it's almost like Black Sabbath inverted, just bow, bow, bow. So he's using kind of like a blues scale, and the guitars and things like that, and he's just bringing in all the elements. Amazing. So after this, he does A Fistful of Dynamite. So the proper title for this, Duck You Sucker, but it was it's also called Once Upon a Time in Revolution in Europe or UK. It was Fistful of Dynamite. I suspect it was that in America. I haven't checked. I've got to confess, I've only seen this film once. It's never on. I enjoyed it, but what actually happened was he didn't want to direct it. He had Coburn and Rod Steiger. There was other actors associated with it. And then Rod Steiger didn't want his second unit guy doing the proper direction, so he got moved to second unit, and Leone took over. There's a couple of different cuts of this. The proper cut's 157 minutes. I need to see it again. I think the problem with this film is coming after the run he did. It feels like a little perfunctory, but on its own merits, it's a good film. You've got all the kind of stylistic tropes in there, and you've got two, genuine big stars at that point. Coburn's in his kind of prime, and Steiger, is coming back a few years before the Oscar for In the Heat of the Night. So, and they create a good balance. Then there's this massive gap in his filmography. Basically, had quite a lot of failed projects. He wanted to do a 900 Days Siege of Stalingrad or something. That would have been amazing. Various other things, and then he makes Once Upon a Time in America. And this, for some people, this might be his best film. Undoubtedly one of the best gangster films ever made. The tragedy of this film, $30 million budget. That's a lot of wedge in 1984. You're probably talking. I couldn't do the calculation for the what it would cost now, but I expect it'd be over $100 million. Kind of like The Irishman. But the box office is only 5.5 million. Why is this basically it was cut to shreds? The proper extended cut's 251 minutes. The European cut was 229 minutes. Now, one of these, I haven't checked, got the standing ovation at Cannes. People said this is fucking amazing. But then it got butchered for the US market for 139 minutes. It became impenetrable. So the first time I heard about this film, I used to read Kerrang magazine when I was a kid. And then there was an article with Axl Rose, and I asked him what his favourite film was. And he said, Once Upon a Time in America. And I hadn't seen it, so I dug out from the video shop. And, it was really intense. I liked the film, I didn't love it, but every successive time I watched it, I loved it more. I actually sat down with my wife to watch it a while ago, and she loved it, but she found the bit where De Niro rapes the Elizabeth McGovern character really hard, and she lost kind of a bit of faith in the De Niro character because she thought Noodles was essentially a good guy. And that is difficult. That is, that's... tonally, Leone's got that wrong. It's just not necessary, that scene. And it's that thing where you have that misogyny in these directors like Leone, Peckinpah, and so on. Scorsese, it's just, they've all got it in there. It's a strange thing, but brilliant film and very cryptic. I still can't work out quite how James Woods dies. Does he throw himself in the compactor trucker? Weird. And then there's that whole theory that Noodles is just off his head on opium waiting for the kind of hoods to get him. It's kind of like a dream. So again, it's using that elliptical timeline thing. Beautiful score by Morricone. It also uses desaturated colour palettes. This uses resilvering process, I believe. So before we had all the filters and that, they would do a special treatment on the development of the film stock once it had been shot, and that would take some of the colour out. Obviously we used to with films like Seven, and then as the 90s went on, early noughties, the Mel Gibson film Payback, but this is an early example of that. It looks great. He also uses Yesterday as a kind of theme. Really cool cast in this. Career best performance by James Woods, I think. De Niro's great. Elizabeth McGovern, Jennifer Connelly. Just brilliant. But like I say, it's one of those films. At this point, Hollywood doesn't understand epic auteur filmmaking. What happened with Heaven's Gate, although it was his fault. It's coming after that period where people stop trusting directors really to deliver. So there you go. I managed to waffle on for 23 minutes. So I couldn't do it only top 10, but I reckon Colossus Rhodes was probably fun. I must get around to seeing it. He's amazing. One of the most influential filmmakers ever. So, yeah. Just looking here, the awards, the British Academy Awards gave it a lot of nominations. Once Upon a Time in America, Golden Globe nominations, Los Angeles Film Critics. So people were recognising the brilliance of the proper cut. Right. See you again. Thanks.